Yes. Yes, we'll start. A very good afternoon to one and all, and a very warm welcome in today's webinar that is Fundamentals of EMG. We all know that the function of human neuromuscular system in health and disease is an area which is very much of prime concern for physiotherapists. In this valuable information about the status of the system can be obtained from the technique which is called as electromyography. EMG has a tremendous role in diagnostic as well as therapeutic purposes which is carried out by physiotherapists. Today, to enlighten us on such an important topic, I feel very honored and privileged to introduce my teacher and today's guest speaker, Dr. Shweta Parikh. She is a Doctor of Philosophy in Physiotherapy from Sardar Patel University. Dr. Shweta Parikh is currently working as an associate professor at KM Patel Institute of Physiotherapy, Karamsad. She is MPT as well as PG guide, as well as she is the guide for PhD. She is also the Gujarat State Sub-Coordinator of IAP Women's Cell. She is having more than 12 years of professional experience in academic as well as clinical. She has published and presented various research papers in national as well as international journals. She has been invited as a chairperson in various national as well as international physiotherapy conferences. She has conducted workshops on EMG NCV in various conferences and even the conference which was organized by physiologists. At the end, I can describe ma'am as an eminent speaker, academician, and a clinician. Before starting the session, I would like to inform you all that we will be having a live question answer session at the end of the presentation. You all can type your questions in the chat box. We will be uploading the recording of this session on YouTube, so don't worry if you miss something now. Kindly keep your microphone off and don't share your screen by mistake to prevent any disturbances during the session. Now, without wasting much time, I would request ma'am to start with the session. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pragna. I'm grateful to BITS Institute of Physiotherapy, Baroda. I'm grateful to Dr. Mehul Kumar, the principal of BITS Physiotherapy College, and Dr. Sarfaraz Nawaz, and of course my own student, Dr. Pragna, who has coordinated with me regarding this webinar. So we are starting ahead with the webinar of the fundamental of the electromyography. As you all know, that though the electromyography gives a definitive information in many of the conditions, but though it is very poorly understood by the many of us. So there is a lot of importance of the electromyography in the many of conditions. So it is important to know before going for the electromyography that we understand the basic anatomy of the muscle. Because electromyography, there are more than 600 separate muscles in the human body, which constitute 40% of body weight in adult. Each muscle is composed of thousands of muscle fiber, which extend for a variable distance along its longitudinal axis. You can see here that it is a motor unit, a group of muscle fiber innervated by one motor neuron, which constitute the motor unit. The nerve twig join the muscle fiber at a point which we all know that is known as a neuromuscular junction. So now coming to the main core of the webinar, that is what is electromyography. The term itself suggests that electromyography is the recording of electrical activity of muscle tissue, or it's a representation as a visual display or audible signal using the electrode attached to the skin or inserted into the muscle. So again, it is electromyography. It's a recording of electrical activity of a muscle tissue, which can be displayed on your computer, or even you can hear a sound also by inserting a needle into the muscle or by putting a surface electrode onto the muscle. So now, which are the types of EMG? The most common and the most reliable one is the intramuscular electromyography. Why? Because intramuscular electromyography, it is extremely sensitive. It records a single muscle activity. It gives access to deep musculature. There is a little crosstalk concern, and it's an objective method. While a surface EMG, that is, you will use an electrode which you use for the nerve conduction study. So same electrode you can utilize for the surface electromyography. This webinar is understood by the person who knows some amount of nerve conduction study, because before doing for electromyography, we may have to do a nerve conduction study, because the combination of the result give a better clinical interpretation. So when we are talking for the surface electromyography, it is quick and it is easy to apply, because you don't have to use a needle, you don't require any aseptic precaution much. So it is very quick and it is easy to apply. As you are applying on the muscle, you are not inserting in the needle, so it gives a minimal discomfort. It is used for superficial muscle, because you cannot access a deep muscle when you are using a surface electromyography. Crosstalk concern, that means if you have put a surface electrode over the abductor pollicis brevis, you may get activity from the flexor pollicis brevis or from the opponent's pollicis, adjacent group of muscle, because you are not sure that on that particular muscle only you are getting the information, which will not occur in case of the intramuscular electromyography, because invariably if you know a perfect motor point, you know that you are into that particular muscle. So that is the basic disadvantage of surface EMG compared to the intramuscular EMG. And there is, of course, there is no standard electrode placement. So these are the pros and cons of the intramuscular EMG and surface EMG. For clinical practice, for clinical diagnosis, we require intramuscular electromyography. Now, which are the indications? We are not going into the depth of list of conditions, because that require a lot of time. So we just go ahead quickly regarding which are the indications. When there is a damage to the peripheral nervous system, the EMG will not help you whether the damage is into the cerebrum or into the cerebellum. It will not help you. When the lesion into the peripheral nervous system, you will get a basic information which can help you. So that's an indication. When you feel that damage is into the peripheral nervous system, that is the first indication. It can be your brachial plexus lesion, it can be your cord lesion, it can be a nerve root compression, it can be anything. So there are 100 of conditions which can come under the peripheral nervous system disorder or condition, that for each and every condition you can do a electromyography. Now the second indication, to localize the site of injury, which is very much important, that where is the site of lesion, right? The nature of the injury, including the severity and chronicity, because sometimes a patient complains that I am having a thinning of the upper extremity since a week, and you find a clinical interpretation in the EMG which suggests that it is a 6-month ago or 1 year injury. So that's how the electromyography will help you to know a severity and to know a chronicity of the disease, and also to know to follow the progress of reinnervation. Now, what is the chances of reinnervation and how much it is regenerated? So it can predict a prognosis also. So these are the indications, gross indication where the electromyography is indicated. Now, which are the contraindications? As such, there is no absolute contraindication, because it is having a multiple advantage. But still, as it is an intramuscular EMG, we are inserting a needle, it is an invasive procedure. So there are relative contraindications are also there, like the patient who is on anticoagulation therapy, or antiplatelet therapy, any bleeding disorder like thrombocytopenia, when there is a skin infection and cellulitis. Skin infection and cellulitis over that particular muscle. If I want to do a EMG of biceps and I am having cellulitis of quadriceps, then that is not even a relative contraindication, right? But over that particular site, if the patient is having a skin infection or is having a cellulitis, that is a relative contraindications. Now we are with the needle electromyography. So needle electromyography, it refers to recording of action potential of muscle fiber firing singly or in a group near the needle electrode in a muscle. So the muscle action potential, when recorded by this needle, it appears as a triphasic as the action potential approaches, crosses, and leaves the recording electrode. Now, it is beautifully seen in this picture. It is a triphasic. You can see here that the action potential is approaches, it crosses, and it leaves the baseline. Right? I am moving the cursor so you can understand better. So that is it is a normal potential. It is a triphasic. So normal muscle fiber are under neural control. A rate and pattern of firing of muscle fiber of a motor unit therefore depends on stimuli approaching through the nerve. Whenever there is a lesion, whenever there is a denervated muscle fibers have an unstable membrane potential and they fire spontaneously, individually, or regularly. So here you can see that the same motor unit is firing every time. So that is on screen, you will say it is a repeat unit firing. When there is an axonal loss, the same fellow is firing every time. So that is a suggestive of a repeat unit firing. Now comes, which are the types of EMG needle electrode? We are not going much into the depth. But the basic thing that there are 4 types of a needle electrode. That's a concentric, monopolar, single fiber, and macro electrode. And this diagram is suggestive. It is a surface electrode, the same electrode which you are using for the nerve conduction study. So the diagram on the right hand side is suggestive of a surface EMG. Now, concentric needle electrode, it is the most commonly used electrode in a clinical practice. It consists of a 24 to 26 gauge needle with a fine wire in its lumen. If you can see, there is a fine wire inside the lumen. The active electrode is referred to the shaft of the needle, thus reducing the surrounding muscle noise. So that is the basic advantage of using concentric needle electrode, that we don't require active electrode and it does not produce a much amount of a noise so that we can hear other abnormal noise clearly. So that is the basic advantage. So concentric needle electrode is the most commonly used needle in the clinical practice. Now, which are the other types? That is the monopolar needle electrode. But the basic disadvantage of this needle, that is, it requires a reference surface electrode and having a greater background noise, which make the monopolar recording less attractive. And again, whenever you are recording MUP with a monopolar needle electrode, you will get a slightly higher amplitude and you will get a slightly longer duration compared to those of the concentric needle. Then the third type, that is the single fiber needle electrode. It records from a small area. The meaning itself, it's a single fiber. So it records from a small area, a 25 micrometer. It is employed to study a neuromuscular junction transmission abnormality. And the fourth type, that is the macro electrode, it is made up of 15 mm shaft of a needle referred to the surface electrode. It records from a large number of a muscle fiber which are innervated by a number of motor units along with the shaft of the needle. Now, when we insert a needle, which are the activity that is occurring? This is now the basic of the electromyography, fundamentals of EMG, that there are three things that we are supposed to see when we do electromyography. First thing, that is the insertional activity. Insertional activity, that means when you are inserting a needle, what happens? That's the insertional activity. Second, spontaneous activity. When you are relaxed, what happens over the screen? And the third thing, when you ask a patient to move a muscle, to do a movement, what happens? That is your voluntary activity. So these three things are important for needle electromyography: insertional activity, spontaneous activity, and voluntary activity. Since the needle electrode record from a very small area, a number of area must be sampled by moving the needle by a small advances. We have to move a needle every time when we take a different sample, because then we can come to a conclusion, then what is the picture of this particular muscle as a whole, right? So we cannot just insert a needle and we can say that the gastrocnemius is degenerated or it is showing a sign of regeneration. No, we cannot say. We have to move a needle into a different direction, and we have to take a multiple sample, because the needle record do a recording of action potential from a very small area. Then comes insertional activity. The slide is visible to all?
No, madam. Actually, I think there must be some network issues from your laptop side. It is not visible. Okay. Ma'am, can you check the connection on the laptop?
Sure.
Yes, participants, just wait for few seconds. There is some network issues.
I think now it is visible.
Yes, ma'am. It is.
Yeah.
Uh,
So the first thing, that is insertional activity. So what is insertional activity? When you insert a needle, it produces a brief burst of electrical activity due to mechanical damage by needle movement and lasts slightly exceeding the needle movement, that is 0.5 to only 1 second. It appears as a positive or negative high frequency spike in a cluster. So when you are inserting a needle, you get some sound and some disturbance over the screen because you are mechanically damaged to that particular muscle. So it is always having a positive or a negative high frequency spike in a cluster, which is absolutely normal. But it should not remain more than 0.5 to 1 second. Then comes a spontaneous activity. The insertional activity, it is increased in the innervated muscle and in myotonia, and it is decreased when the muscle is replaced by connective tissue or a fat. Now, spontaneous activity, which is very important for diagnosis purpose, once the insertional activity stop, delay after a second or so, in a normal individual, there is no spontaneous electrical activity. Because when you are inserting a needle, you will have some sound. And then you will not have any abnormal activity over the screen. So now, which are the abnormal spontaneous activity? First thing, that is fibrillation and positive sharp wave, myotonic discharges, complex repetitive discharges, myochemic discharges, fasciculations, and cramp. Fibrillations and positive sharp wave, those are a spontaneously occurring action potential from a single muscle fiber. Sorry, I think you are not able to see slide.
Hello, yes, participant. Sorry for the network issues, but just within 1 minute we'll be done. So kindly cooperate.
We are extremely sorry, and to make you waited for 5-10 minutes, we are really great regret. I think now it is visible. Shall I start?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It is visible.
Yeah. So the first and most important abnormal activity that we are talking about, that is fibrillation and positive sharp wave. Fibrillation and positive sharp waves are spontaneously occurring action potential from a single muscle fiber. These are regularly at a rate of 0.5 to 15 hertz with an amplitude of 20 to 200 microvolt and a duration of 1 to 5 milliseconds. Fibrillations are triphasic or biphasic, but having a characteristics of initial positivity. The positive sharp waves itself, the name itself suggests that there is a long duration biphasic potential with initial sharp positivity followed by long duration negative phase, which gives rise a sawtooth appearance, right? So positive sharp wave, that means there is a sharp positive deflection, which is followed by a long duration negative peak, which gives a sawtooth appearance, which is having a higher duration compared to the fibrillation potential. So in the first diagram, you can see a trace of a positive sharp wave where a positive deflection followed by a long negative deflection and a fibrillation potential, which is a biphasic or a triphasic in nature, which is the most common abnormal spontaneous activity. Normally, when after inserting a needle, when patient is relaxed, you should not get any sound when patient is relaxed. When you are getting this kind of activity, it shows some amount of any abnormality, pathology, right? Now comes, both are recognized by their characteristic sound on a loudspeaker. When you hear, you will you will hear a sound of a clicking sound of a clock, or rain is dropping over the roof. So that sound will also give you idea that it is a fibrillation potential or a positive sharp wave. Positive sharp waves are having a same sound but blunt compared to the fibrillation potential. Now these are the fibrillation potential and positive sharp wave most commonly seen in the element diseases like anterior horn cell disorders, radiculopathies, taxopathies, or axonal type of neuropathies, NM junction disorders, or any muscle disorder like myopathy, myositis. You will see this fibrillation potential and positive sharp wave in this any of the element conditions. Now, why this fibrillation potential and why this positive sharp wave are coming? Because whenever there is a degeneration, it does not develop only hypersensitivity to acetylcholine, but the number of acetylcholine receptor also increase, which leads to depolarization and which is responsible for fibrillation and positive sharp waves. Now the second spontaneous activity, that is myotonic discharges, which is commonly seen in the myotonic conditions. Now this myotonic discharges, the action potential of a muscle fiber firing for a prolonged period after external excitation are the characteristics of myotonic discharges. The action potential here you can see in the diagram, the action potential wax and wane. So amplitude increase and decrease, wax and wane in amplitude and frequency, because there is an abnormality in the membrane of a muscle fiber. So the frequency is 40 to 100 hertz, regular and rhythmic, and the sound which you will hear for the myotonic discharges, it's a dive bomber in nature. Now I am playing a video of a myotonic discharge. Where you will hear a sound of myotonic discharge, which is a dive bomber in nature, and you will see that amplitude and frequency, there is a waxing and waning. Now you see the amplitude will increase and decrease. Yes, can you see that? It is increased suddenly and then it gradually bends. So there is a waxing and waning pattern. And the sound is a dive bomber sound, which suggestive of myotonic discharges. Now the next, which is also a common abnormal spontaneous activity, that is CRD, that is complex repetitive discharges, repetitive and synchronous firing of a group of muscle fiber. The amplitude can range from 50 microvolt to 1 millivolt, and duration can be 50 to 100 millisecond. But the typical characteristic of the CRDs, that is, it does not have a pattern of waxing and waning. The whole entire sequence will repeat at a slow or a fast speed at a particular frequency, that is 5 to 100 hertz. Right? So it is unlike a myotonic discharge, it does not wax and wane, rather it appear and disappear suddenly. That is the typical characteristic of a CRD. and it is commonly seen in the Duchenne muscular dystrophy and spina muscular atrophy. It is seen in the many other conditions also, but I am telling about the most common condition and the highest incidence, which is in myopathy and spina muscular atrophy. Now, I am showing you a video and audio of a CRD. You can see here. Yes. Now the entire sequence repeat, and there is no waxing and waning, unlike your myotonic discharges. The whole sequence repeat, right, with a specific frequency. So that's the characteristics of a CRD, which is not occur in case of a myotonic discharges. Now myochemic discharges, which is a spontaneous muscle activity, which is myochemia, which is seen as a fine worm like a quivering of a facial muscle. It is commonly seen in the facial muscle conditions like multiple sclerosis, brainstem neoplasm, facial nerve palsy, polyradiculoneuropathy. It is also seen over the limbs. A limb myochemia is also common in a radiation plexopathy and chronic nerve compression. A myochemia, which is look like a normal potential, but the characteristic that is a burst of discharges occur together. So burst recur at the regular interval. This frequency and amplitude and second that you have to remember, but I am showing you just a glimpse of how it look like and how the sound will be, right? So the myochemic discharges, which is a fine and worm-like contractions, where a burst of activity, which you will see in this video, the burst is recurring at particular interval. And at first glance, it looks like a normal MUP, right? But it is much slower than a normal MUP. So that is your myochemic discharges. Now here you can see in the 3 diagram, which is beautifully showing that myotonic discharge. The first diagram, there is a waxing and waning. The second, which is showing a CRD, which is having a particular pattern, which does not showing a pattern of waxing and waning. And the third diagram, that is myochemic discharges, where the whole burst recur at a particular interval. That's a myochemic discharges. Now fasciculation, those are fasciculation are also occurring in a normal individual also. We also get a fasciculation sometime, but the pathological fasciculation you can see in a amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, radiculopathy, syringomyelia, peripheral neuropathy, tetany. But here you will not have a fasciculations like a benign fasciculation. You will also have a additional neurological features, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. So fasciculations can be normal or it can be abnormal also. And fasciculations will be also a look like a normal potential, but it is random. It is randomly occurring and irregularly, and frequency is 1 to 500 per minute. Now cramp potential, again, it can be a normal and it can be due to electrolyte imbalance, which is salt depletion or even a pregnancy. So this is the table where it is showing that fibrillation potential, which is having frequency of 0.5 to 15 Hertz, myotonic discharges 40 to 100 Hertz, CRD 5 to 50 Hertz, fasciculation 1 and 500 per minute, and myochemic discharges 40 to 60 Hertz. Amplitude also vary, and I have listed out the diseases where it is common. Fibrillation potential, which is common in element disorder, nerve, muscle, and NM junction disorder. Myotonic discharges, which is common in myotonic conditions, polymyositis, paramyotonia, CRDs, which is common in DMD, the Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, a spinal muscular atrophy, fasciculation, as we discussed, it is common in the even a benign fasciculations are normal, and it can be abnormal in a condition like ALS, root compression, or tetany. Biochemic discharges, which is seen in the multiple sclerosis, a facial palsy, polyradiculopathy, or benign neoplasm, brainstem neoplasm, which is also having a limb myokemia. Now, coming to the voluntary activity, this everything will be at rest. At rest, it should not come any sound. It should be silent on the screen. But if it comes, which are the abnormality which we have seen up to now, abnormal spontaneous activity. Now coming to the voluntary activity, when we'll ask a patient to move, right? So now we are discussing about the voluntary activity, which is seen on a screen as a motor unit action potential. Now MUP represent a sum of the muscle action potential which is supplied by anterior horn cell. So the number of the muscle fiber, as we all know, it varies. It can be 9 in extraocular muscle and it can be 1900 in a gastrocnemius muscle. Now the normal motor MUP is according to the Henman size principle, it recruited from a size smaller to larger. That means a smaller motor unit will recruit first, larger later, and largest last. So that is the Henman size principle. This is important to understand because when it comes on a screen, you have to also identify that whether there is a loss of larger unit or loss of a smaller unit. So that's why Henman size principle, it is important. It is characterized by duration, number of phases, amplitude, and turns. You can beautifully see in this slide the duration, which is from the initial takeoff to the point return to the baseline. That is the duration. Then amplitude, that is peak to peak, and phase, that is number of time it crosses baseline. That is a phase, right? So when it crosses more than 4 times, it is suggestive that it is having a polyphasic. So normally it should not have a more than 4 phase. When it is a more than a 4 phase, it is suggestive of a polyphasic, and polyphasic suggests that there is a desynchrony of the motor unit potential. Now there is a recruitment of a motor unit potential is recruitment which is seen in the neurogenic disorder. Motor unit are recruited at a relatively low force in a myopathy, which is known as a rapid recruitment. Now, interference pattern, this we were discussed about when we ask to move when needle is inside the muscle. Now, and we'll see over the screen, then what will happen? That is our interference pattern. So during strong voluntary contraction, now we'll apply a resistance and we'll ask a patient to hold that contraction, and we'll see over the screen. So during strong voluntary contraction, what happens normally? Normally, there is a dance pattern of a multiple superimposed potential, which is known as a interference pattern. Normally, in the first thing you can see here that it is a dance pattern. The action potential are superimposed over each other. Neurogenic pattern, as I mentioned, it is there is a damage to the nervous system, neurogenic pattern, there is a pattern is broken, which is also known as a discrete pattern or a broken interference pattern. Now, in a muscle disorder or a myopathic condition or a muscle disorder, cases like a myositis or polymyositis or Duchenne muscular dystrophy, the interference pattern will be dense, but it will be having a lesser force. So that is known as an easy recruitment pattern. Now, how are you going to discriminate between the neurogenic and myogenic pattern, which is very important when you want to diagnose, when you want to know the prognosis also. So how are you going to know that it is a neurogenic pattern or it is a myogenic pattern? When it is a normal, the duration will be 3 to 15 milliseconds. When it is neurogenic, the duration will be longer and it is shorter in case of a myopathic condition. Amplitude, normally it is 300 to 5000 microvolt. It is larger, it is more than 5000 microvolt in condition of neurogenic condition, and in myogenic condition, it is smaller in amplitude. The normal amplitude, it is biphasic or triphasic, while neurogenic condition, it is polyphasic and polyphasic. As I mentioned, when phases are more than 4, and you can say polyphasic when it is having more than 15% of the polyphasic you are seeing on a screen, right? You have to screen a minimum 20 potential over a screen over that particular muscle, and then you have to find out by putting a duration, by putting the amplitude, and by diagnosing a phase also, and then you can say that whether it is a polyphasic or it is having normal amplitude. So after coming over the screen, now you have to also analyze each and every individual motor unit potential. So before going whether it is neurogenic or it is myogenic, when you are looking over a screen, you cannot say that it is neurogenic or myogenic. You have to also analyze, and you have to individually analyze the unit and duration, amplitude, and phase. So these 3 things you are supposed to analyze. Then resting activity, normally it is silent. There won't be any abnormal spontaneous activity, but it can be present in a neurogenic condition. It can be present even in a myogenic condition. So abnormal spontaneous activity, which fibrillation potential and CRD, which we have seen, that can be present in either neurogenic, either myogenic. IP pattern is a full in a normal individual, but it is partially incomplete, broken, or discrete in case of a neurogenic condition, and myogenic condition, it is invariably full, but amplitude, if you see, it is lesser because there is a lesser amount of force generated by a muscle. Now, which are the factors affecting electromyography? So there are technical variable also. It also depends that which type of needle that you are using, which type of electrode you are using, whether you are using a surface electrode or needle electrode, which type of preamplifier and amplifier you are using. The method of recording also, whether you are using a visual method, recording method, you are using surface EMG. So that method of recording also influencing over the quality of the electromyography. The physiological variable, that is age, you cannot have a same amount of amplitude to a 3-year of an old child or a 5-year of an old child to the 60-year of a old male. The same age you have to quantify also. So age wise also there are different criteria. As there is a geriatric age or as there is an adult or in a kid, you will have a different amplitude and different duration. Then it also depends on which muscle you are studied, the location of the needle, and the temperature of the muscle. Now, this is very interesting that there are certain fact and myth. Because of lack of time, we are not going into much of the depth. but still I will give a glimpse of the fact and myth about the EMG. The most common myth, that is, one must wait for 2 to 3 weeks following nerve injury. It is not always we have to wait for 2 to 3 weeks to do electromyography. So that is the first myth. So time of ordering an electromyography, you can order as early as 2 week or 3 week, right? You need not wait for a 1 month. Then the second thing, determining the neurological recovery. So there are two forms. That is, whenever there is a true axonal regeneration, you will see a short duration, low amplitude polyphasics, that is known as a nascent potential. Nascent potential means it is immature potential. It is showing that there is a sign of early regeneration. But here we are discussing that now whenever there is a recovery, whether it is a true axonal regeneration or it is a due to terminal collateral sprouting. So when there is a true axonal regeneration, you will see a shorter amplitude, shorter duration, and polyphasic. But when there is a terminal collateral sprouting, there will be a longer duration and larger amplitude polyphasic. So here you can see over the screen that it is a very short amplitude, shorter duration, immature potential. It is just emerging. So that is known as a nascent potential. Then it is a terminal collateral sprouting, which you can see that it's a larger in amplitude, longer duration compared to the nascent potential. So the third thing, that is the prognosticating outcome. Now, for example, individual does not show any improvement in a strength after several months, right? You are seeing that it is a zero only or it is a flicker contraction only when you are taking a MMT. So now at this juncture, the EMG will help, because when you are seeing nothing over the MMT, but when you are inserting a needle, if you are seeing a early nascent potential, this suggests that there is a neurological recovery. It also prognosticates that additional functional recovery should occur in time. It establishes the fact that there is a axonal continuity, right? So when you are seeing clinically, but if you do EMG, it also gives a prognostication in a certain condition. Differentiating acute versus chronic injury. Now, how are you going to discriminate whether the condition is acute or whether it is a chronic? When you see a FIBS and a positive sharp wave, it takes 1 to 4 weeks to appear. But as a rule, a larger amplitude of the fibrillation and positive sharp wave suggests that injury has occurred currently, acute injury. But when a smaller amplitude of FIBS and positive sharp wave, it suggests that injury has occurred chronic, it is at least 6 months or year. So that is give a significance that whether injury is acute or chronic. Now, precise localization of a nerve injury. The people feel that EMG is the best for having a localization, but compared to EMG, the NCS is more precise because we can stimulate a nerve at a multiple site, which is not possible in an electromyography. Of course, when you are doing EMG of that particular nerve of a multiple muscle supplied by that nerve, then that can give a localization, but NCS is having a segmental stimulation, so you can stimulate at a multiple site. So NCS is also precise. It is not only EMG. So that's a myth that only EMG can localize. No, NCS can also localize by identifying the muscle with and without denervation potential. One can usually map out, approximately estimate where is the site of injury, right? So EMG can also tell you, but NCS can also tell. It is not only EMG. That is what I am trying to tell, right? Now, judging the quality of electromyography, that is when there is a Skin temperature is monitored with a temperature probe that connect to the EMG machine. So temperature should be at least 30 degrees Celsius in lower limb and 32 degrees Celsius in upper limb. So sometime in a winter when it is a lower temperature, we have to give a infrared before doing nerve conduction study or before doing electromyography, because temperature also having a role over the amplitude and duration in the electromyography, and also over the role of, in the nerve conduction study also. It also influences the latency and the amplitude and conduction velocity in case of a nerve conduction study. Now, the people feel that it is only that is affected side that you are supposed to do electromyography. No, sometimes a contralateral asymptomatic side also we have to do when we want to compare certain abnormal finding. So other side also we can do EMG. It is not like that we have to only do a EMG of a affected side. So a take-home message for this fundamental EMG, that is, if we know this EMG, a clinician requesting electrodiagnostic study will benefit from knowing the proper time frame for ordering them, what information can be obtained by doing EMG, and when it is specifically needed, and whether the study is of good quality or not, that you can understand. So these are my references, and thank you all of you, and I'm really sorry for technical issue which come across. Thank you, Pragna, and thank you, BITS Institute of Physiotherapy College. Now,
Okay.
is there any query?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'll ask the participants.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. So if anyone has any question, kindly write in the chat box. Yes, anyone? I request all the students, if they have any query, they can get it cleared. We have called an expert, so I think you should utilize this particular thing. You can ask any doubt if you have any. Ma'am, we will wait for 30 seconds.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, ma'am, we have a doubt from Dharmesh sir, and sir has asked, may I know some of the most suitable EMG analysis that can be used to analyze muscle fatigue at the lower back?
For a fatigue, you want to know the fatigue of the lower back muscle?
Yes, ma'am.
So fatigue is basically identified by the repeated nerve stimulation, that is RNS. But even if you want to do through EMG, so EMG is not a good thing to diagnose a fatigue level. Rather than EMG, you can do a repetitive nerve stimulation, RNS, which we are doing for the myasthenia gravis NM junction disorder. But even if you want to do the fatigue of the lower back muscle, you can do a surface EMG, and you can utilize the IP pattern, and then you can interpret through the IP pattern. Because it is sometimes very risky to insert a needle over the lower back muscle for a fatigue purpose. So that's why I'm not advising for a intramuscular EMG for a fatigue purpose. So RNS is a better option where you can utilize this fatigue assessment. And soon we are starting a certificate course of the EMG NCS at our Vaikaka University, Karamsad. We are launching in the month of October or November. So we are grateful if anyone is interested. we are regularly getting a number of cases because it is 950 bedded hospital, and we are doing the EMG NCS over a routine basis, and we are getting references from the vicinity of the area also, like a Kheda, Nadia, Khambat, where they don't have this facility. So the number of patients exposure is very good here. So is there any query further? Because I was not able to discuss the each and everything of the EMG, because otherwise then I have to include about the your condition wise how to interpret EMG. So that becomes very lengthy for the 45 minutes. So we are just discussing about the fundamentals. So regarding that, if there is any query, then I am grateful.
Okay, I think, madam, there are no more queries.
Yes.
So we'll end our session here.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Just 2 minutes. Yeah. So on behalf of entire BITS Physio team, I would like to thank Dr. Shweta Parikh for sparing her valuable time to enlighten us with her knowledge. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to our founder, president, and chairman, our CMD, our joint managing trustee, and campus director for their constant support and guidance. My sincere thanks to Principal and Vice Principal of BITS Institute of Physiotherapy for their continuous support. My sincere thanks to the HOD CSE for all the technical support. I would like to extend my thanks to Gadedada for the graphic designing. And lastly, a very big thank you to all the staff members and all the participants for sparing their time in making this event successful. And thank you so much, ma'am, again.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.